Okay, let's get started. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Heather Stone, Executive Editor of the Habitat Group, which publishes Fair Housing Coach. And I want to welcome everyone to today's Fair Housing Coach's Coffee Break Quiz. The topic is families and fair housing compliance. And I'd like to let everyone know how this is going to work. It's a Zoom platform, so I will be asking a series of questions on the topics of families and fair housing compliance. Each question will pop up as a poll question, and you can answer anonymously, true or false. And then I'll share the results. 80% say true, 20% say false. And our speaker today will give us the correct answer and an explanation why it's the correct answer. But because it's such a short little webinar quiz, we're not going to have time for any Q&A or chat. Please don't use those functions. But if you do have questions, you can send me an email after the webinar to hstone@thehabitatgroup.com. We'd love to hear from you. If you have questions or ideas for future webinars or quizzes, please let me know. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce today's guest speaker, Gwen Volk. Since 1983, Gwen Volk has assisted developers, owners, agents, and on-site staff in navigating the complexities and challenges of the many programs that provide housing opportunities for low and moderate income families. Gwen served as Vice President, President, and Chief Executive Officer of a Midwest affordable housing development and management company from '83 to '96, and as Chief Compliance Officer for a Dallas-based firm from 2001 to 2014. Since 1996, throughout her other pursuits, Gwen has provided training and consulting services from coast to coast through Gwen Volk INFOCUS, Inc. She has extensive knowledge and experience in Section 42 low-income housing tax credit, tax-exempt bond, home, Section 8, 236, 202 PAC, 202, 811 PRAC, and rural development programs. Gwen serves on the board of advisors for two of the Habitat Group's other newsletters, Assisted Housing Management Insider and Tax Credit Housing Management Insider. And thank you so much, Gwen, for being with us today.
Glad to be here.
Okay, I'm going to launch our first question. Okay, most of your residents have lived at the community for many years. Since most are over 55, you are justified under the senior housing exemption to restrict occupancy to adults and to advertise the building as an adult community. True or false? Folks, a few moments to answer. Still getting some answers in. Okay, I'll reread the question. Most of your residents have lived at the community for many years. Since most are over 55, you are justified under the senior housing exemption to restrict occupancy to adults and to advertise the building as an adult community. Okay, I'm going to close the question. And let's see, 14% said true and 86% said false. Gwen, what do you say?
Well, this is, most of you are correct. This is false. And this is a really interesting topic because, and you might want to stop sharing that.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, that would be a good idea. So this is really an interesting topic. So I'm imagine we have people that do different types of housing on this call. And if you do conventional housing, market rate housing, then you are able to have housing that is called housing for older persons. Sometimes we abbreviate that as HOPE, which makes you exempt from the family status protected class. You're actually exempt from that. But however, if you have a tax credit property that doesn't have any sort of HUD funding on it, any deep subsidy on it, you also have the ability to have what is called housing for older persons, which does actually allow you to reject families with children from your property. If you have a HUD property, however, there is no such thing as an exemption from the familial status protection for a HUD property. So some of you maybe have a 202, 202 PAC, 202 PRAC, and you're saying, well, my property is a senior property. And it is true that HUD requires the head of household or spouse or co-head in those properties to be a senior for most 202s. There are some 202s that are other than that, and that is true for a 202 PRAC for sure. But if that senior has a family member that can fit in that unit according to your occupancy standards and is not 62 or older, which is the HUD requirement for elderly, that you cannot reject that family because of that. I just had this question yesterday from one of my clients. They had a 202 PRAC. The gentleman was 65 and he wanted his 15-year-old daughter to move in with them. It was a 1-bedroom. They have a 2-person per bedroom standard. I said, of course, you have to move her in. You know, she's going to sleep in the living room or something. So yes, that's very true. As far as the rest of this question, what they were saying is that maybe you are in a property that could technically qualify for this exemption, okay, like a conventional, let's say, and they're informally deciding, well, we're just going to call this housing for older persons. There are actually a bunch of hoops that you have to jump through in order to get that exemption, especially for the 55 and plus exemption. There's another one that's 62 and plus, where everyone in the household would have to be 62 or older, and all the units, but that one is pretty, that one is sort of obvious, but the 55 plus, you have to do some things. And if you're a tax credit, your state agency is going to have some additional requirements beyond just what the federal government says about the exemption. So just deciding that you are doesn't work. You have to market your property as senior housing, retirement housing. You have to have things in your lease about it. And you have to maintain a certain percentage of units that are 55 plus. And if you do all those things, then you can say, we don't rent to families with children. But I want to put a note of caution on there. We don't have a question, I don't think, here about advertising, the no kids thing. But even if you have housing for older persons and you are designated as that and you've done all the right things, you still can't say in your advertising that we don't allow families with children. You can't say that. You're going to do it when they come, but you can't say that in your advertising. So that's what I'd like to say. Anything else you want me to cover on that?
No, I think that was great. Okay, let's move right along. And this is our next question. Community may not be found liable for housing discrimination for applying occupancy standards limiting all units to 2 people per bedroom. True or false? The community may not be found liable for housing discrimination for applying occupancy standards limiting units to 2 people per bedroom. Still have some people answering. Okay, I'm going to share the results. And 54% said true and 46% said false. Gwen, what do you say?
Well, once again, this question is false. There's a lot of misunderstandings about this. Let me uncover my face here. Just a minute. Whoop, sorry.
Yeah, that was almost 50-50 there.
Yeah, right. That's a common misunderstanding. In 1998, there was a Federal Register notice that was published on behalf of the Department of HUD Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity Office. And it was called, just a minute, I have it open here. It's called Fair Housing Enforcement Occupancy Standards Statement of Policy. And in that notice, it talks about a 2-person per bedroom standard. But it also talks about a lot of other things. So when people think that 2-person per bedroom is a safe harbor, it was designed to keep landlords out of trouble for discriminating against families with children So it was decided, let's set some sort of a reasonable thing that'll keep them out of trouble for the most part. So they're not saying one person per bedroom, which would be a problem, but it's more complicated than that. And this particular notice, which I was going to have you put this in the chat, but I guess you don't have the chat, but you can find it at hud.gov/sites/doc_35681.pdf. Maybe they can send that to you later. And that's the actual document. If you are somebody who uses the HUD handbook, you can just go to the end of chapter 3, and it is exhibit 3-2, the same thing. So if you're somebody who does HUD properties, it's right in the handbook as an exhibit. But anyway, and I'm also going to reference the HUD handbook again, because whether you use the HUD handbook or not, in paragraph 3-23 of the 4350.3, this deals with the whole issue of occupancy standards. And this doesn't just apply to HUD, because this is a rule that applies to all housing. So anybody, even conventional, can read that paragraph 3-23, and in common language, which is better than the Federal Register language, you will find out exactly what that means. And so they talk about a lot of things. And one of the things that they say is that if it looks like you are developing standards so that you can exclude children, that is going to be considered discrimination. And also it talks about your house rules not discriminating. We'll get to that, I think, in another question that we have. But anyway, I wanted to tell you some of the things that it talks about here. So in paragraph 3-23E, it gives a list of things you have to consider. And this is also in that notice. So you have to consider the age, sex, and relationship of family members. So that means that one of the things they talk about is if you have an infant, let's say you have a 2-person per bedroom standard, and you have a 1-bedroom, and you have a couple with a 6-month-old baby, and you say, no, we have a 2-person per bedroom standard, you would have to be in a 2-bedroom. That could be considered discrimination. Now, I say could be because it would depend on whether that family decided that that wasn't right and that they wanted that 1-bedroom. If you're in a conventional, that 1-bedroom is going to be cheaper than that 2-bedroom. So that'd be another reason why they would want it. But that could be illegal discrimination. Again, I say could be because it depends on whether somebody brings a case about it. If the family has opposite sex children that are like teenagers, we aren't allowed to say, well, you have to have separate buildings for those teenagers. However, the family could say, I need a larger unit than your occupancy standards suggest because of that, my children, and that would be acceptable. So what I always recommend people do is have not a policy that you put in your tenant selection plan, but a procedure for your staff of how to do the 2-person per bedroom, because your tenant selection plan just says 2 persons per bedroom, right? Something like that. Or some of you might have 2 persons plus 1. But you need to have a policy for your staff, not one that you give to the residents. So what are we supposed to do if this happens? What are we supposed to do if this happens? You know, and different scenarios like that. Another thing is if you have a conventional property and you have dens and things like that in your units, which we're not going to have obviously in assisted housing, but if you have something like a den, as long as it has a way to get out, like a window and a door, that would have to be then considered a bedroom, even though you're not calling it a bedroom. So that could also cause an issue for you. And I always say could cause because somebody has to bring a suit for it to be, but on the face of it, that would be discriminatory against a family with children refusing. Now, if it's a closet, like I used to have this really big closet in my house, and I go, man, you could put a baby in here, you know, but it didn't have a window. So it didn't have egress, so that wouldn't count. Somebody told me once, well, in order for something to be a bedroom, it has to have a closet. Hello, that's not it. You just have to have an alternate way to get out. So anyway, those are things that you need to think about. And again, it's a 2-person per bedroom. If that's all you're telling your staff, they're going to get themselves into trouble. So it's much more complicated than that.
Okay, let's move along to the next question. A couple with a 5-year-old is looking to rent a unit in your building. The only unit available hasn't been remediated for lead-based paint. Since lead paint is a danger to young children, you can refuse to rent to them without violating fair housing law. True or false? A couple with a 5-year-old is looking to rent a unit in your building. The only unit available hasn't been remediated for lead-based paint. Since lead paint is a danger to young children, you can refuse to rent to them without violating fair housing law. True or false? Okay, people are still answering. Okay, I'm going to end the polling. And let's see. 26% said true and 74% said false. Gwen, what do you say?
Well, we seem to have a pattern here. This one is also false, okay? So this is how this particular one works. I don't know if any of you are from Massachusetts, but in Massachusetts, they actually have a law that they've had on the books since 1971, and I think it's been updated a couple of times, that tells you that you cannot use your lead paint to discriminate against families with children. Now, interestingly, even though they have that law, they got sued in 2019 saying that that law, even though it says that, was causing landlords to not rent to children because of the lead. So they had some controversy, but the reality is that that cannot be used as a reason not to rent. So what you're going to have to do is mitigate that. Now, any of you on the East Coast, I live in Texas. And I'm originally from South Dakota, and we just don't have a lot of lead paint in these areas, you know. But those of you on the East Coast, you know, the origins of our country, you have lead paint. You got a lot of it. You've got these really old buildings that are very nice, but they used to use lead paint before 1978, right? So the mitigation becomes necessary. So if there is a sense that landlords are refusing to rent or to show people units that are older because of the presence of the lead paint and not wanting to have to mitigate, that is considered discrimination against families with children, again, if somebody brings that case.
Okay, I'm going to move right along here to the next question. Your community just finished an extensive landscaping project to reseed lawns and replace plantings. To protect its investment, the community may adopt a rule prohibiting children from playing outside without violating fair housing law. True or false? Your community just finished an extensive landscaping project to reseed lawns and replace plantings. To protect its investment, the community may adopt a rule prohibiting children from playing outside without violating fair housing law. True or false? Okay, let's see. Most people said false. 99% said false. Whoops, did I? Okay, yes. Look, waiting for Glenn. There you go.
Well, I think we're catching the trend here. Yes, it's false. Once again, it's false. I have a story of, well, here, let me just say this. Just like in your personal life, you know how the counselors always tell you to deal with the behavior, not the person. It's the same here, okay? So the behavior is that they're tromping all over the lawn, right? And it's probably not just the kids. I mean, maybe you've got some adults that are backing their van up to move a couch out of their apartment or something. So as long as you just focus on the behavior and not whether they're little people or big people that are doing the behavior, then you can certainly put restrictions on that. I'm from South Dakota originally, and there are no trees there naturally in the part of the state I was from, no trees. So you have to plant your trees. So whenever we built a property, we always had to plant these little trees. And those kids, I'm going to say it, the kids, they were out there grabbing the trees, springing them like boomerangs and stuff. And obviously it was a problem, but you know, you don't make a rule that says parents, you know, keep your kids off of the trees. You just have a enforcement against, you know, somebody damaging your trees or whatever it happens to be. Pretty straightforward.
Right. I'm going to try to relaunch that poll question I missed in the beginning.
Yeah, it'll let you do relaunch if you ask it to do that.
Okay, let's see. Here we go.
There, it's up there.
It's up there. Okay.
Yeah,
A
it's up
couple
there.
with twin toddlers asks about available 2-bedroom units. There are 3 available, 2 on the ground floor and 1 on the 4th floor. There's an obvious danger of children falling from balconies, so it's okay to tell them only about the 2 ground floor units. Once again, a couple with twin toddlers asks about available 2-bedroom units. There are 3 available, 2 on the ground floor and 1 on the 4th floor. There's an obvious danger of children falling from balconies, so it's okay to tell them only about the 2 ground floor units. True or false? And the answer, oh boy, everybody said false.
They're on to your game now.
Yes, yes.
Well, they might have known it anyway, so we'll give them the benefit of a doubt. So this is what I call the good intentions, bad results thing. In fair housing law, you do not want to do the thing that makes sense to you. You want to do the thing that the law says. So, you know, you could be genuinely concerned about these children, and it does happen that children fall from balconies. I remember a case on the East Coast where a child fell out of a window from a balcony and was killed, you know, so it does happen. But this is, again, sticking our nose where it doesn't belong. It's the family has every right to choose any apartment that they want. This would be the same thing if you had a person in a wheelchair and you didn't have an elevator and they wanted to live upstairs. I mean, it's going to be their problem how they get up and down from that apartment. So your common sense might say, oh, I really should steer them away, you know, from those floors, but that is going to be the incorrect answer. It's about not letting people have their own choices.
Right. Well, that was an easy question. Everybody got it right. It was supposed to be our first question, but ended up at the end. But thank you, everybody, for attending. And thank you, Gwen, for being our guest speaker today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay. Bye-bye, everybody. Please email me if you have any questions or suggestions for future webinars. Thank you and good afternoon.